Hi, I'm Casey, and I don't know what I'm doing. If you're new here, I do book content. I don't really have a typical spiel that I do at the beginning of these, but today I wanted to do something that, at least to me, sounded like fun, and it's basically like a mid-year, halfway point, 5-star check-in. So I have gotten to a place in my life where I'm reading a lot more books than I used to, and I remember reading all of them, but I don't always remember what I gave them rating wise. So it's really interesting to me at the end of the year to kind of look back through my books and see what I gave 5 stars, especially if some of them I don't remember very well. And so I really quickly wanted to run through all the books I've given 5 stars, and then we're going to talk about my 5 favorite of the year so far. I'm just going to quickly run through these. I'm not going to give author names, but they will be like somewhere up here on the screen if I don't have the physical copy. So very quickly, we have Calling for a Blanket Dance, Fina, Against White Feminism, Don't Fear the Reaper, Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead, Know My Name, All the Living and the Dead, How the Word is Passed, Woman Eating, Disability Visibility, 1,000 Ships, Middle Game, The Exorcist, Men Who Hate Women, They're There, Crying in H Mart, In the Watchful City, The Salt Grows Heavy, Defect, and The 7 Moons of Molly Almeida. So my top 5 I'm not going to talk about in any particular order, because right now I don't really know the order I would put any of these in, and I'm fairly surprised when I look back at the entire list of books I just said, how many of the nonfiction really stand out to me. It was one of my big goals this year was to at least read 1 nonfiction a month, and I have at least so far been successful in that endeavor. And it's astounding to me just how much like really incredible nonfiction that I have managed to pick up this year. And so with that being said, let's just go ahead and talk about the nonfiction I would put in my top 5. The first one I want to talk about is Against White Feminism by Rafia Zakaria. This was just absolutely incredible. I read this really early in the year, and as, you know, a white person and a white woman, I really felt like very, like, I don't know, I felt like called out, and I felt very much called in, and I really appreciated a lot of what this book had to say. It really discussed so many topics that I wasn't really familiar with. Like I had not thought about the journalism surrounding the US invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan after 9/11, and how so many white women used that as an opportunity to peddle feminism as a disguise for what was truly just white supremacy and patriarchy. And the way that, you know, so many white journalists talked about the women living in these countries as if they were less than. And it was something that, you know, if I had stopped to think about, I probably could have put at least some of the pieces together. But the book really succinctly talked about what it did and what these people did and how it impacted the way these women were seen by the whole world. And I truly just loved this book. I devoured it in one afternoon, and I think about it all the time, and I think it's just incredible and just a really powerful message that talks about how feminism has historically been used by white women to continue to suppress and oppress women who are otherwise marginalized. And it really was absolutely fascinating and absolutely eye-opening, and this one just really has to make it in my top 5 of the year so far, just truly for how much of an impact it has had on me. The next one I'm going to talk about is How the Word is Passed, A Reckoning with the History of Slavery Across America by Clint Smith. This book is a nonfiction examining the history of slavery across America and the impact it still has on this country today and on the people in this country today. And in particular, how so much of the history of slavery has been washed over and particularly whitewashed over, and how it's so much of what really happened has to be passed down from generation to generation versus being taught in textbooks. In this book, the author visits a variety of monuments and historical sites in particular that pertain to slavery, and discusses the history of them, and also the way that the people, the proprietors of these establishments and the curators of these establishments often have to, you know, tell one version of history for certain people, i.e., you know, people who look like me, and then the more accurate version of history for non-white people. And it was really incredible. It's This is one where I can't really recommend the audiobook enough. It was astounding. The author reads it himself, and I think you can tell how much all of this meant to him. And that's part of why I love listening to audiobooks narrated by the author, because you can really feel the love and the care they have for what they have crafted and for what this means for them. And this one was so incredible. I'd seen this floating around in a couple places, particularly on like BookTube, and I think that this has gotten a good amount of, I don't want to call it hype, but like press and prestige, and I just think it deserves more. I think this is a book that everyone should take a moment to read. It was really eye-opening, and it was really impactful, and there are moments in the book where the author describes his interaction going to what was ostensibly a KKK rally and talking to people, and his fear there, and what he had to deal with, and the people he interacted with, and the way that they perceived him as a black man, and how they spoke to him, and the ways in which he had to take so much painstaking effort to keep himself safe. And it was incredible. And this was just really, really sad and intense, and also really beautiful. And I really can't recommend the audiobook enough for this one. And I'm going to say it every time I talk about this book. The next book I'm going to talk about is Men Who Hate Women by Laura Bates. The tagline for this one is From Incels to Pickup Artists, the truth about extreme misogyny and how it affects us all. And again, it could not be more accurate. It is such a deep dive into misogyny that is so inherent and insidious in our culture, in particular here in the United States, or at least in North America, and the rampant way it is ratcheting up in both violence and in rhetoric and just in extremism in general. This one really fucked with me quite a bit. I was fully having to take breaks after chapters because it was so intense, and it was really impacting me, and really, like, I don't want to throw this word out too easily, but I can't think of the correct word right now, and it really frightened me. It's to realize how many people are out there who hate people who are like you for no reason other than an aspect of who you are that you can't control. It's frightening. And then you realize that, like, I'm not, like, people like me, white women, we are not even the main target of these heinous people who want to enact violence against women's bodies. It's the way that trans women and black trans women and other marginalized women and women of color are just not protected and specifically targeted for this violence, and targeted as like the downfall of masculinity and all this kind of stuff. It's really, really intense, and it really was just, it's something I think about all the time, and it's something that to me was so incredibly impactful to read, because it just, I don't know, I think that there are times where I think that what I have experienced as a person and as a woman is just, part of normalcy and what it's like to be a woman walking around, or like a young girl walking around. And this author really put into perspective that, like, no, you shouldn't have to deal with being harangued just walking down the street, or as a teenager being harassed by older men who are like in their fucking 30s. And it really just put all of that into perspective for me. And it, like, again, not only like my own perspective, but the way that, you see other people who have it worse than you, and you're like, oh, everyone has to deal with that. And it's like, no, nobody should have to deal with that. It was really impactful, and it was really scary to read about. And I was really just this deep dive of like these vile people who just need some help. You would hope just need a little bit of help to come back into more of reality and to walk away from these kinds of hateful mindsets. But a lot of times they don't have that. and it escalates until someone's dead. And it was, I could go on and on about this. This one obviously had a major impact on me, and it has to go with my top 5 because of that. Alrighty, the next 2 books I'm going to talk about are my 2 favorite fiction books of the year so far, and I am going to have to start with, of course, Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones. I'm going to talk about this constantly, apparently. I love this. This is the sequel to My Heart is a Chainsaw. We are still following Jade Daniels several years after the events of the first book, and a serial killer is in her hometown, and how she has to deal with him and the consequences that it could have for her loved ones. And it was really incredible. I thought this was a great sequel. I felt like it did such a good job of still keeping a lot of the things I loved in the first one while also introducing a lot of new elements in this. And I really could just go on and on about, the theme of trying to reinvent yourself outside of your hometown and where you grew up, but coming back to that place brings you back into that same mindset, and oftentimes makes you feel like you are that same person and you can't move on or get closure. But I am going to stop talking about this one because I feel like I've talked about it enough, and I will talk about this again in, my favorite books of 2023 next year. So let's move on to the last one. The last book I'm going to talk about today is The Seven Moons of Molly Almeida. This is incredible. I have just recently read this. I don't think I've talked about this in any video yet. This is the story of Molly Almeida, who has died, and now he has 7 days to sort of make his peace with his death and with his loved ones before he is trapped on the earth as just a spirit roaming. And if in those 7 days he decides to move on, he can. This is beautiful. This is just fucking amazing. I was really blown away by this. I think that this handles the themes of grief and loss, and not just like loss of an individual that's like tied to, the grief that comes when someone you love or care about dies, but the loss of like your innocence and the loss of the person you could be and who you think you were supposed to be, and the catalyst to that happens in so many of our lives. And it was so beautiful. I was crying at the end of this. I can't stop thinking about this. I think about this all the time. I think about Molly and Dee Dee and Jackie and everything they had to go through, and the way in which Molly tries to make not just amends, but tries to protect the people he loves, even though he's dead. He's in a position where he can't do anything to protect them. He can't interact with the physical world anymore, and he can't talk to them. And the way in which he still has this just intense passion to care for them and protect them and keep them safe. And it really impacted me in such a big way. And I thought it was just so beautiful, and it was so lovely. And my favorite thing about this had to be the end. And I can't talk about anything about the end because it would fully just spoil the rest of it. But I thought the ending of this was so perfect. And I think that's the only thing I can truly say about it. I thought the ending of this was just perfect. Okay, there we go. Those are my 5 favorite books so far this year. Please do algorithm things if you want. I'm really bad at outros, and I always do these in different orders every time. I hope you're having I hope you're having a wonderful day. If not, I will see you next Friday, and yeah, I guess that's it. Bye.